Good morning, everybody. We're delighted to be here. Delighted to see you all in the audience, and thank you to South by Southwest for having us here. I'm with Rodney Brooks, who I think you all know is one of the great roboticists of our time. He founded iRobot, which makes the Roomba, which cleans your apartment, and also military robots. I love that it cleans apartments and cleans landmines in Iraq. Now he does industrial robots. We should have a video playing here of some of his industrial robots, Baxter and Sawyer, which are changing manufacturing around the world. The thing I like about Rodney is that he kind of combines the best features of robots and humans. You know, when he was 4, he knew math, more math than any adult he knew, which is kind of robotic, but he's also quite friendly. So, pure blend of robot and human. Rodney Brooks, welcome.
Thank you.
So, first thing I want to ask you, just a foundational question. I want to get into a lot of economic questions, a lot of moral questions, a lot of questions about whether we're going to be obliterated, a lot of questions about whether everybody in the audience will have their jobs by the end of the week. But let's start with the definitional one, Rodney, which is, what is a robot?
To me, a robot is a machine that senses the world, does some computation, makes a decision, and then acts outside its body in some way. And I have that definition because I don't want a dishwasher to be a robot. But a Roomba acts outside its body and sucks up dirt that's outside it.
So it's something autonomous? It's something
that just operates, yeah.
But like my Nest thermostat is not a robot, my dishwasher is not a robot,
yeah,
but the
it's got to do something
physical.
It's got to do something physical for me to call it a robot.
Okay, great.
Which is the original, you know, from the original Czech robota, something that does work.
Something does work is the definition of robot?
Yeah, that was from the play, Karl Capek's play in the 1920s.
You learned?
That's where we got the word robot from.
1 minute in. I've listened to all these conversations with Rodney Brooks, done all this research, watched these movies, and I've already learned something 30 seconds in. Okay, what are robots good at, and what are robots not good at right now?
Right now, robots, well, there's actually two sorts of robots. There are teleoperated robots, which the robots that are in Iraq and Afghanistan, were in Iraq and Afghanistan, and now in Fukushima, are operated remotely by a person. So they've got a person in the loop giving them high-level commands. Robots that are autonomous, that just do things, are not really very smart. They can just do something repetitive, something simple. They may be able to adapt to changing environment more or less, often less. A Roomba is able to adapt to a very changing environment, but a Roomba is more like an insect than trying to do a task.
But a robot that has a human in the loop can do almost anything, right? They
A
can do
robot,
precise surgeries.
They can do precise surgeries. They can because you've got the person there doing the cognitive thinking that our robots can't do at the moment.
And autonomous robots, can they for example, they really struggle with dexterity.
Dexterity is one of the things you'll see in these videos. These robots are doing very simple hands, just suction cups or just 2 parallel jaws that come together. People have been working on trying to build good hands for robots for over 40 years, and no one succeeded much. They're just not. We just haven't done well at it. It's really
so they can pick things
task.
up with suction, but they can't, for example, lift this glass of water.
Well, here's a task that no robot can do. You ready?
I'm ready to see.
I'm going to show you. Here's a robot. Here's a task. No robot can do this. Actually, which pocket should I use? Yeah, I'll use this pocket. I would not let a robot do this. And pull out a coin. Now, I went in there, didn't hurt myself, fiddled around with my fingers with touch receptors, found a coin, recognized that it was a coin, and then grasped it and pulled it out. Way beyond any research robot's capable.
So no robot can do that now, and no robot will be able to do that in your lifetime.
I don't know. If we had a concerted effort where the National Science Foundation put a lot of money into building robot hands, concentrating on 4 things at once, mechanisms, materials, because the materials of our fingers are very important, algorithms, and something else. I forgot which other department.
This Rick Perry moment right here in Texas.
Yeah, getting interdisciplinary teams to work together. Maybe it could happen in 10 or 15 years, but it's that level.
So you've been doing robots your whole life. If you've seen Fast, Cheap, and Out of Control, you may not remember that. That was this man right here. Are you disappointed in the progress that robots have made?
At some level, I'm disappointed. Another level, it's been fantastic. When I came, I grew up in Australia. When I came to the US to study in 1977, there were 3 mobile robots in the world. At iRobot, I'm not there anymore, has produced 16 million Roombas. So that's a pretty good jump from 3 to 16 million. So in that sense, it's been
But if somebody had told you in
vastly
1977, you know, you will be at the absolute apex of this field, you will have done everything that anybody could do, and you'll have like
cleaning
cleaning
floors.
floors.
Yes, it's actually worse. There's a group at University of Colorado who are using a Baxter. They're working on the human biome, and they're using a Baxter to open stool samples. So, it's gone downhill.
But so in a way, you're pleased, right? You've had a lot of success. You've built companies that are worth hundreds of millions, billions of dollars, but they're not doing what you really thought they would be doing.
We don't have the super intelligent robots that were available in science fiction when I started working in this area. No, it's been much, much harder than anyone guessed.
So, okay. So you work at iRobot, you leave iRobot, you go to Rethink Robotics, you build...
And in between, I was also on the faculty at MIT.
Yeah, MIT faculty, whatever. So you build Baxter, which is sort of looks a little bit like a human, can lift boxes, works on assembly lines. Then you build Sawyer, which we've been watching, which looks a little bit like a snake or something like that. What comes next? How is this evolving?
Well, in manufacturing, which is what Rethink is doing, we're going to see a broader range of geometries of robots, but doing similar sorts of things. I think the big thing that's going to drive robotics over the next 15 to 20 years is elder care, because I actually can't see the audience out there, but I think you're on average a lot younger than me, but it's going to really suck for you, because there's going to be a lot of old people around.
They're not going to be old for like 50 years, Rodney.
Yeah, you're not going to be, but in the next 20 years, it's going to be, in Japan, it's going to go to over a third of the population is going to be over 65. It's going to get to that in another 40 years in the US. And who is going to look after all those elderly people as they get more frail? I think that's going to pull in robotics. And already, this whole thing about self-driving cars, to me, a modern, high-end car with driver assist, I refer to them as elder care robots, because it lets the elderly drive safely longer than they would without it. So it gives them control over their lives, gives them independence longer.
But if this is the great big moral cause, if this is going to affect all of us, if this is where robots are headed, Sawyer doesn't look like something I want taking care of my mother.
No, not yet. I think we need a bunch more research and some government agencies are starting to support research on elder care. I don't know how to build an elder care robot yet. I think we need a lot more research. And I was just in a lab on Friday at Georgia Tech, Charlie Kemp's lab there, where he's got robots helping quadriplegics, he's got robots helping with models, people getting into and out of bed as they would when they're elderly, et cetera.
Robots helping models?
Well...
Let's talk about the economy for a minute. By the way, I should pause and note that we are going to have an audience Q&A, and if you have questions, you should tweet them at #AskRodney, and you should not go too deep into the thread of Ask Rodney because somebody has been tweeting strange robotic images. But tweet some questions to Ask Rodney, and we will answer them.
Now they're all going to look.
Yeah. Let's talk about the economy. So people in which professions in this room are likely to lose their jobs to robots in the next 10 years?
To physical robots.
To physical robots.
I don't think many people in this room are going to lose their jobs to physical robots. I think the danger of a physical robot taking over jobs that are currently done is probably about drivers for Uber and Lyft. I think that's more likely in the shorter term, in the 10 to 15 year time frame. One could argue that ATMs took away work from tellers. There's actually more bank tellers now than there were before. But I don't know what the bank tellers do, because I actually never go and see one, but there's more.
Right.
So it's not straightforward on how robots take away jobs. Has the Roomba taken away jobs from cleaning people? In Denmark, it's one of those European socialist countries, so there's government agents who go around and help the elderly in their homes. And if you want the government person to clean your house, you have to have a Roomba, because to make it more labor efficient for the government workers helping people in their homes.
And in fact, you've talked about Spain in previous interviews. You talked about the effect of the Roomba on Spain, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, at iRobot, up until about a year ago, I don't know the date of the last year, the fastest growing market for Roombas in the world was Spain. Spain has this incredible unemployment rate. Why are people buying Roombas to clean their homes when there's so many people unemployed? It turned out it was because of the collapse of the construction industry. Spain had imported a lot of workers from South America for a construction boom. The wives of the construction workers, construction workers were men, their wives became maids as part-time work. When the construction industry collapsed, everyone went back to South America, all the maids left, and even with 25 to 30% unemployment, Spanish people didn't want to be cleaning other people's homes, which I understand. I wouldn't want to clean other people's homes. So instead they buy Roombas.
Right, so it's sort of almost a reverse effect of what you might imagine. And during this presidential campaign, which some people may be aware of, there's been a lot of talk about the decline of American manufacturing. But if you look at the data, American manufacturing is actually growing, in part because we can do things quickly and efficiently. It declined for many, many years, but the last, I think, 5 or 6, it has been increasing. Do robots have any effect on that? Is it that we're able to integrate robots well, which can create jobs?
I think that will become the case, but it's too early to say that that's what's driving it at this point. But in China, we've had this whole conception of infinite supplies of low-cost labor in China. Cost of labor has gone up and up in China. The number of 19-year-olds, absolute number of 19-year-olds, is decreasing by 30% over a 1-decade period because of the one-child policy, which just got reversed. And so, does anyone here have a cell phone? Yeah, it was made in China. And it was made in China by large electronics manufacturing companies, and a well-run electronics manufacturing company, a well-run one in China, has a labor turnover rate of 16% per month. Per month. Because people don't want those jobs. They're horrible jobs. And the rising middle class wants different, better sorts of jobs, probably more like the jobs you all have here than sitting on the assembly line. So China is desperate for robots. China is importing robots like crazy to maintain their position as world leader in manufacturing electronics.
And so your feeling is that your robots will perhaps do things that humans used to do, but they will create better jobs for humans and, in fact, perhaps expand the economy?
The robots of today in manufacturing can only do the really dull, repetitive stuff. And so, because they're not dexterous. So people will still be there using their cognition for the more complex tasks. And, just as happened with agriculture, we went from, over a 100-year period from almost half of the U.S. population was working in agriculture to 1%. Now, that didn't cause mass unemployment. It did decimate the population of horses, though. So it wasn't good for horses.
Well, but this is the big question, right?
We hope we're not horses in this round.
Right, you're the optimist, but are we the horses, are we the humans in the next example?
That's a reasonable question.
And the answer is?
The answer is we'll see.
You're the man at the center of this. Give us something a little more specific than we'll see.
There is a hollowing out of the middle class at the moment. But I've just been looking at the data this week. It's not as bad as political rhetoric, if you want to raise it to that word, it would have. There is a hollowing out. It is, the wealthy are doing way better, and that's nothing to do with robotics. That's other structural parts of the economy. But the middle level jobs have not been growing as fast as the other jobs at each end. So there is a change happening. Whether we can find new ways to employ people, or whether we need to think more about negative gearing on taxation, so that people all have some basic wage, which I think is going to be incredibly hard to sell in the US, but it might happen in other countries first. That could be one of the things we see over the next 10 to 20 years.
All right, let's not get too deep into wage economics, but thank you for that. Let's instead get into obliteration and warfare. So this past summer, a couple of guys, Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Stephen Hawking, published a letter saying it is time to stop the construction of robots for warfare, or at least to think seriously about the danger that they all come and blow us away. When you read that letter...
and there's two things that get jumbled together in the press and partially in that letter.
So when you read that letter, let's talk about the warfare letter first, not the sort of general AI letter. When you read the warfare letter, what did you think?
Well, I think it's, all questions are more complex than simple answers. So, at iRobot, we never had a weaponized robot, but we thought, lots of people asked us about weaponized robots, and what we did know that was in Iraq and Afghanistan, when 19-year-old kids in the military, they go into a dark place at night, and something happens, they're scared beyond belief. A robot can afford to shoot second. A 19-year-old kid in our military can't afford to shoot second. So the idea that if there are robots, it will be worse, things will happen faster, is not necessarily true. It depends on how you.
So you actually think that the robots you manufactured in the Iraq War.
We did not have, they were not weaponized. They were only going out to poke at bombs.
And they weren't weaponized because the Pentagon didn't ask you to weaponize them, or because you were morally opposed to it?
A bit of both. The Pentagon did not ask. The military is actually a very conservative organization. It doesn't want these new things that they don't understand. You may have seen the drones landing on aircraft carriers. There were some trials, and then they said, no, we're not going to have automatic planes landing on our aircraft carriers anymore. So they are much more conservative than the press or Hollywood would make out in many cases. So we weren't even doing it.
Let's say.
But morally, for myself, it depends on the circumstances. Depends on how you do it. If you are willing to have a robot, if you want a robot that just goes in and blasts everyone, I'm not interested in doing it. But if you want a robot that goes in and takes fire and locates where the bad guys are, that's a different story.
What about a robot that goes in, takes fire, and also fires, that replaces the 19-year-old infantryman?
Maybe we're not ready for that yet, I don't think, technologically, but I'm not opposed to it.
If you had been offered a big contract, you would have at least considered building it.
Would have considered doing research at the company, yeah.
And the evidence from America's drone war is that, yes, drone war can reduce the number of fatalities and can be more precise, but it hasn't had an entirely peaceful effect in, say, Waziristan. I mean, the fact that you have robots that can do things that humans can't mean you do things you wouldn't have otherwise done. So in that case, robots are accelerating warfare.
That's true with all machines. In fairness, that was true with the napalm, sprayer in Vietnam. People were doing things which probably weren't very moral at all, and the machine enabled it. So I don't think it's just robots per se. I think it's a much more general question about technology.
So the proposal that Gates and Hawking and Musk were making is that we need to think seriously about the role of robots in warfare, and we need
to. And it makes sense that it be constrained by the Geneva Conventions. And most countries, not all of our current politicians, but most countries would say, let's keep the Geneva Conventions. Geneva Conventions have been very successful at stopping biological warfare agents. There's been lots of cheaters on the side, but they haven't been willing to actually deploy.
Right.
So the Geneva Conventions play a role.
So you sound in that answer like you're agreeing with the letter, but I know you disagree with the letter in other ways, or you think they haven't looked at robotics the right way.
I think it's a much more complex question. If you can build a robotic system which reduces loss of life on all sides, maybe that's something that should be considered. But no one. These things are very hard to think about from a logical point of view. How many people die per day in car accidents around the world? Do you know?
Lots.
3,000. 3,000 people per day die in car accidents around the world. How many people per day die in car accidents around the world caused by a self-driving car?
Nobody so far.
0. What happens when the first person gets killed in a self-driving car?
Legislation.
All hell is going to break loose. But there's 3,000 a day killed by other human drivers. So there is no rationality in this.
So there is no rationality in this, but you also believe that Gates, Musk, and Hawking have overestimated the power of robots. I mean, this is one of the fundamental
This is the separate issue.
Right.
And they have talked about there being no place for humans in the short term and robots, super intelligent robots. I think they make a fundamental mistake. None of them are directly involved. And Bill Gates has backed off this second part, whereas Elon Musk and Hawking haven't. When a machine performs something, does something well, or a person does that same thing well, we need different models about how they generalize. If a person can do a particular task, we have a good model of how the competence around that comes. We don't have a good model of how the competence around that performance comes. So let me give you an example. A year or two ago, deep learning hit the world's headlines. Deep learning, now we've got, and deep learning is what was just used in the Go playing program in the last few days. Deep learning came, machines can now learn lots of stuff they couldn't. And deep learning is why our speech understanding systems on our phones are so much better today than they were 3 years ago. Deep learning has had real positive impacts, real applications. The stories that came out in the New York Times had an example of a Google program automatically labeling an image. It was some people playing Frisbee in a park, and the Google system labeled that image as people playing Frisbee in a park. Now, if a person was able to, you see a person, they're able to look at that image, they make that label, there's a whole bunch of other questions you could ask them that they could answer. You could ask them, how many people are in the picture? They'd know. Where's the Frisbee? If it's a high enough resolution, what are the people looking at? How does the game Frisbee work?
Right.
What is a game? What does play mean? What's a person? That machine that labeled the image couldn't answer any of those questions.
I believe there was also somebody put a dismembered, identified a baby, and then somebody put a dismembered baby with the legs where the arm should be in the arm, so the legs would be in the computer. So that's a baby.
Yeah, and there's been a whole bunch of papers showing that sort of thing, because it's not doing it in the general way that people are doing it. So our generalization from performance to competence, which works for people, doesn't apply to these machine algorithms.
Okay, so how does that affect the debate with Elon Musk?
I think they're overestimating how close we are to superhuman intelligence. I don't think we're close at all. And so, can I use an example?
Use any example you want.
So, in 1916, Einstein predicted gravitational waves. We only observed them in the last few months. There was big stories about gravitational waves. Suppose in 1916, the German government had said, we must find gravitational waves. We're going to put all the resources of Germany behind it. We're not going to bother with this First World War thing. We're just going to look for gravitational waves. 10 years later, they would not have found gravitational waves because there were so many new things that had to be invented. Lasers were important. All computation was important. All sorts of things had to be invented. And no one had a clue what had to be invented in order to detect gravitational waves. Didn't mean it was impossible, meant there was a lot of stuff to be done.
Right.
The sort of intelligence that Elon Musk and Stephen Hawking are hypothesizing as existing only exists in Hollywood movies, and we have no clue how long it's going to take or what things we have to invent yet.
But they're not saying it exists now, they're saying it's coming soon. So they wouldn't be saying it's like gravitational waves, which took 100 years. They would say it's like the nuclear weapon, where it took, 12 years from the first paper about the capabilities for nuclear weapon to the first atomic bomb.
Physics is so simple.
So you think we're more like gravitational waves? We are.
The mechanism, the first papers on the nuclear bombs explain the mechanism. We don't know the mechanism yet.
Right.
We don't know the mechanism.
For superintelligence.
For intelligence.
For intelligence.
We don't know the mechanism to build something as intelligent as a dog.
So listening to you today here, it seems like there are two big reasons why you're not as afraid of robot armies and all of this. Both because robots can't do as much as people think, and because they can't think as much as humans think. Which of those two is more limiting right now?
They're both. They're equal in my mind. We're just a lot further off from where people imagine we are.
So people imagine we're much closer to having much more dynamic robots than we possibly are, and therefore, what is the policy recommendation for how we think about the role of robots in warfare?
The other mistake they're sort of making, they've got Moore's law in their head. Moore's law has been great for predicting certain increases in technology, but it doesn't apply to everything.
Right.
Moore's law is very helpful for better robots. It's very helpful for more intelligent programs, but it doesn't mean the scientific breakthroughs happen on Moore's law scale.
I mean, because what's surprising to me is that the things that have improved technologically in our world over the last couple of years the most are cell phones and sort of the general sort of expansive power of the internet. And you would think that both of those things would lead to advances in the two categories, right? Cell phones have made incredibly smaller processors, much better cameras, smaller batteries. So the dividends of the cell phone war should be really helping robotics.
They are, and they're going to help it much, much more in the next 10 to 15 years.
And they should accelerate it much more quickly than it has accelerated.
They should accelerate deployment. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to accelerate the level of intelligence.
But
because we don't know the mechanisms. We can't apply. It's not just a matter of pouring it in there.
But it also seems as though not only do we have these sort of mind-boggling improvements in cell phone technology and batteries and cameras and all that, we also have these mind-boggling improvements in image recognition, and there are things that we can do.
Image labeling.
Image labeling.
Different from recognition.
Partial image recognition and therefore image labeling. Sort of the general computational power and the sense of what we can learn from all of the information put on the internet, aggregated.
You're just about to do exactly what I said.
I'm doing it.
You're doing it.
And I'm getting you to push back on it.
We have that performance, therefore we can expand the competence.
But the number of improvements, you read about improvements every year or two in image labeling, where the guy who's doing the image labeling says, God, I didn't think we'd be able to do it for 10 years, and we're able to do it in a year.
Yeah,
right?
and so let's look at deep learning, which has done this. Deep learning was essentially started as backpropagation in 1985 or so. It went for about 10 years, and everyone sort of gave up on it. So if you'd asked people in the 90s, is this method ever going to be powerful? They all would have said no.
Right.
A couple of people, Jan LeCun, who's now at Facebook, and someone at Toronto who's now at Google, pushed on it, and it surprised everyone in the field. So we can't predict. We weren't able to predict which techniques were going to pan out. There were 50 other techniques which people gave up on, which also failed, and haven't panned out in that way. We don't know ahead of time. It's not this lockstep prediction of how things are going to get better just because of Moore's law. Moore's law allows better putting more useful products out into the world, but it doesn't increase our understanding of how to build intelligence.
So your policy recommendation, or the way you think we should all think about it, is robots are going to get better. They're going to get a lot better, but there is so far to go. We don't have to worry about the stuff that people are worried about.
We don't have to worry. The other thing that people talk about is the AI. We're going to have a singularity where the AI programs get good enough they can start rewriting their own code.
Right.
Well, if we had that, if we're going to have that in the foreseeable future, you'd think that we could have an AI program which could look at a 10-line piece of C code and understand what it's doing and modify it. We don't have an automatic programming system that can handle 10 lines of C code in the way that a human who is 3 weeks into their first semester of programming as an undergraduate or in high school can understand. We're not at that level. So it's a long way from being able to understand millions of lines.
It's a long way off, but let's talk about some of the choices that are going to have to be made as people make these machines, because you're one of the people on all of the committees that think about the choices. So moral reasoning. So 3 years from now, or 5 years from now, or 10 years from now, we're going to be picked up at the Austin airport.
I sound like a real downer. In the old days, the AI guy would be saying, we're going to have this, we're going to have this, and the person from the press would be saying, no, we're not. We couldn't do that.
It's not just the old...
And it's gone the other way. See, now it's the media who's saying, we're going to have this, we're going to have this, and the people doing it are saying, no, we're not. It's hard. It's really hard.
And it's not just the AI guy, it's actually Rodney Brooks, right? If you look at the videos of Rodney. So 10 years from now, how many years, we're going to be picked up at the Austin airport by a robotic car. It's going to drive in. It's going to be mapping all the cars around. But at some point, it has to kind of make a moral decision, right? So if it has a choice of hitting a bicyclist or swerving into a tree, humans have some way of making that decision.
He told me he was going to ask me stupid questions.
Yes. So how do you think about how to deal with this kind of choice?
I think that's...
The whole goal here was to try to find something that would flummox Rodney.
Yeah. Back in, do you remember 1789?
I've heard the year was consequential.
17, I think it was 1789. The first hot air balloon flew over Paris with people in it. And what were they worried about? They were worried about the inhabitants of the balloon's souls getting sucked away, escaping. They weren't worrying about noise abatement at airports, but you can trace back to there a direct line to noise abatement at airports. So the questions that were going to be important in the future were impossible to tell from the early days. I think it's when Arthur C. Clarke, Asimov had 3 laws of robotics. Arthur C. Clarke had 3 laws. One of his 3 laws was any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
Right.
When we think about these advanced things, they become magic. When they're magic, you can make up any question you want about magic. And it doesn't mean that that's going to be what we're worrying about at the time. We don't worry about whether a car right now is left by its driver and there's a baby in the back seat. Why didn't the car open the window so the baby didn't cook? We're not saying that. That's a moral decision our cars should be able to make today. And we could legislate that every car has to have sensors in it to sense whether there is an alive thing in it, and to open the windows when that happens. So there's a moral question that could be answered technologically today. So you can make up lots of questions.
So, all right.
And let's ask it a different way. Are today's car manufacturers immoral because they don't have that sensor system and don't automatically wind the windows down?
I wouldn't call them immoral, but if I was working at one of those car companies, I'd be interested in that question and whether you can solve it in a way. Right, so that leads to maybe a different way of looking at it, which is that if you were going into this field and you were 25, and you were going into robotics and AI,
I wish.
and you were going in and you were interested in all these questions, what would you focus your research on? What is the 25-year-old robotic researcher, you finished your PhD, what do you do now? Like, what's the area that's most interesting?
It depends what you want out of life. If you want a 10 to 20 year financial hit, elder care robots. That's where the VC money is going to be pouring into that. That's where you're going to be able to go start a company and do well in the next 10 to 20 years. If you're worried about the long-term habitability of the planet, it would be about environmental cleanup. How can we have the massive environmental cleanup that we need to do? How can we have robots that sort the trash we make into recyclable, into stuff that has to be landfill, because people don't like doing that. People are at Starbucks, I don't know which thing I'm supposed to put the stuff into, the recyclable or the landfill. I don't know which goes where. And people don't bother learning that. So build robots to do that. And I think we could, with deep learning actually, you can do a lot of classification and do the manipulation, which is sort of push into one pile or push into another. So depends what your goals are in life.
And what about something that you talked about a long time ago, but that we haven't actually made tons of progress on, which is sending lots of robots into space?
Well, I'm a space geek. I've dreamed about going to space, and I've worked on robots that eventually their progeny did go to Mars. I think if Elon Musk is right about being able to get lots of people to Mars, we're going to need a lot of robots there before the people get there to build the habitation for them. I think the movie The Martian was a great movie, but I think in The Martian, they land the return vehicle, they land the food supplies, they just land them there. I think if we are going to go to Mars in any real way, the robots will have to go with those early supplies and set up the habitation.
And that's something that robots actually could do, because it doesn't involve intent consciousness or any kind of choice, and it just involves basic programming.
This is how to do it,
So how far are we off from designing robots that could, for example, build a landing station if given specific instructions and materials?
And supplying the right materials. That's a very doable thing. I think for a fraction of what a tiny fraction, just a few weeks worth of what we spent on Iraq, we could develop those robots.
All right, so elder care if you want to make money, environmental cleanup if you want to save the sort of crushing problems of the world, and space if you want to build the next habitat for Elon Musk.
Yeah.
So I used
it all
to
comes back to Elon.
Well, a man who's picked multiple fights in the press with Elon Musk, you got to mention him a couple of times. One of the words I used there was intent, and it's something that you've talked about a lot, which is that robots do not have intent. Robots are not anywhere close to having intent. We couldn't possibly program intent into robots. What is intent?
We don't know, but we know it when we see it. So I was saying the program that just won the best of 5, won the first 3 games in playing Go, Alpha Go. It lost the 4th one. Who knows what's going to happen with the 5th one? But it won. It doesn't sit around saying, gee, it's been a day and I haven't played Go. I'm getting bored. It has no understanding of time in the world. It has no goals. When it's presented with something, it says this is the best move. That's what it does. That's all it does. That's very different from a person who's playing Go, who has lots of goals. They want to show they're better. It doesn't want to show it's better. It doesn't know what better means in that sense.
So this is sort of related to the answer you gave before, which is that robots can do specific things but are not aware of all the other ideas around it.
Yeah, and in the 90s, a bunch of people started doing research on that, and I was one of them, trying to build systems. We were aiming at insect level intent, which is pretty low. We spent years on it. Nothing much came of it.
And what exactly were you trying to solve, and why didn't you solve it?
We weren't trying to solve so much as duplicate what biological systems.
Right, so you're studying how an insect moves, how an insect makes its choices.
And has an ongoing existence in the world.
Right.
And
so what did you think you were going to be able to do?
we thought that, well, then after we'd built insects, then we'd build, little lizards, and then we'd build kittens, and then we'd build chimps, and then we'd build humans. It was just this, it's natural, right?
Why did you stop? Why did you cut your losses? Sometimes it's hard to stop on a project like this.
Yeah, there's still a few people working, very few people working on it, but not much progress was made. It didn't seem to have the oomph that even an insect had.
So there's
it didn't seem to get as good as an insect.
So there's a general perception that the AI field was disappointing for a while, sort of, I don't know, let's say 1980 to 2005, I don't know, and then has become, quite successful. Was it partly that it got stuck?
In very narrow capabilities, and some of them driven by Moore's law, some of them driven by breakthroughs that we couldn't have predicted in those particular areas. But it's very narrow. There's lots of little narrow points.
Lots of little narrow points. But as part of the reason it got stuck was because people were focused too much on trying to solve these big questions about intent mimicking human intelligence instead of trying to solve smaller questions?
No, because there were people working on all the other things at the same time.
So you don't think the field got bogged at all by...
No, there was a particular subgroup of us who went off and did that and didn't make much progress.
And they've all abandoned
and there was an area called artificial life, and the journals started, still around, but not the vibrant community it was at one point.
So I started this by asking you what is a robot, and now I want to ask you sort of the side question, which is what is a human? Because or the flip of that, because you've talked about what you think will happen in the future, which is that there'll be sort of a merging or a combination of humans and robots?
Well, there is no limit to human vanity, and I've been reminded by that out on the streets here, seeing some of the ink and other things on people out on the streets here. There's a higher density just along here, but. So we have technology that people are starting to put in their bodies. We replace hips when people get older, but we replace hearing with cochlear implants. There may well be someone in this room with a cochlear implant. I don't know. Rush Limbaugh has one. That's how he hears. There's a computer inside his head which gets reprogrammed occasionally, changes the way he hears the world. People are working on retinal implants for people with macular degeneration. Once that technology gets a little further, I think people will start to put it into their bodies and do body modification with it. Not for clinical reasons, but to optimize themselves, to change themselves in some way. I went on a Kickstarter project. I got a RFID tag that I can inject into myself. I haven't done it yet. I've got it at home.
You own it, but you haven't injected it?
I haven't injected it yet. It's not, it's not legal to inject it, but
you can go to Mexico and inject it, I believe.
Sorry?
I believe you can go to Mexico and inject it.
Yeah, there's ways to do it.
We're not far.
Yeah. Because I just thought it would be neat to be able to, control things with my hand by having an RFID tag. So I think we will put more technology in our body fairly soon, because the technology is starting to be there. We'll start augmenting ourselves, and as we start augmenting ourselves, we become a little more robotic. At the same time, we're trying to make more intelligent machines.
And how does CRISPR change things?
CRISPR.
And actually, explain briefly what CRISPR is. I think.
Yeah. So CRISPR is this technique for modifying, for cutting out a little piece of genetic material, putting other genetic material in it, and that's great. But then it's then the gene drive. You can make the CRISPR system so that it puts the copying mechanism into the genes. And so for mosquitoes, certainly, we've got it so that there's been demonstrations where you put just a couple of mosquitoes, well, a few mosquitoes into the wild population in a lab, and a few generations later, every mosquito has that thing in its gene. That doesn't happen through normal mating. You know, you put, this one's got the gene, this one doesn't, there's a 1 in 2 chance their child has. In this case, all the children have the genes. So with CRISPR applied to humans, we'll be able to select, we'll be able to have designer babies a lot easier than we could now.
So the evolution that's going to happen is we'll be using CRISPR to design babies. We'll be building implants, RFID chips, cochlear implants, things that come
And then
next.
a whole bunch more, you know, chips will go in there.
But a whole bunch more chips will go in, and then that's the future that we should be thinking about, not the Hollywood future in which C-3PO with a machine gun suddenly walks in the convention center.
Yeah, and in fact, Hollywood did have a movie on this, Bicentennial Man with Robin Williams, where the robot, Robin Williams, wanted to be declared living over a couple of 100-year period, while all the people were putting the same technology that he was built out of into their bodies to extend their lifespan.
So is the way this evolution happens also something you think that the 25-year-old robot AI expert should be thinking about, working on?
If they're evil.
All right, we're going to move to audience questions in about 3 minutes. So remember, you tweet them to #AskRodney. As you can see from this panel, he is willing to answer anything and answer it in a sort of interesting, amazing, intelligent way. Let me ask you one sort of bigger question, which is, you know, you've worked on what is a human, what is a robot. Has it changed your sense of religion and of God and of where we came from?
I've become more tolerant to religion as a result of working on robots, and let me tell you why. In my earlier days, I'm a confirmed atheist. I am a member of the Church of Atheism, solidly an atheist. And I couldn't understand how people could be scientists and also believe in the higher power of God. Because it's not like when you're taking a molecular biology course and you're talking about, you know, these two molecules come close together and then God intervenes and makes them lock together. No, it's van der Waals forces. It's all mechanical. So where's the room for God in that? And then I realized over time that I was just the same as people with religion, because I treat my children, who I can view at one level as just a bag of biomolecules interacting under laws of physics at the bottom. But I treat them differently than that, too. I love them unconditionally. I support them. But, geez, they're just bags of molecules. Why bother?
Did you ever get mad at your son and say, you're just a bag of molecules?
But so I've got this dual system, too. And I realized that I had a dual system, that I was, part of me views the world in terms of science, and part of me views the world at a very different level. And it gave me much more understanding of how religion and science can coexist.
So it's not the working on robots, it's more becoming a father that changed the way you think about religion.
No, it's applying my scientific work to think about my children, and then seeing that I did it multiple ways, that I had multiple conflicting belief systems running at once.
All right, well, I think if we're going to talk about God and children and bags of molecules, I'd like to ask the various bags of molecules out in the audience to send in your questions, and I believe they're going to pop up on the screen here. While we wait for the first one to pop up, who are you rooting for in the AlphaGo match?
Well, I wasn't rooting for anyone. I thought that AlphaGo would win. I was pretty confident it would win. But you see that the sparring partner for AlphaGo over the last few months started out ranked somewhere around 550, 600 in the world. He's now ranked about 300. He's got incredibly better from that experience. And we just saw number one lose 3 times and then win once after that. Did he improve? Did he sort of figure out something intuitively about the play of AlphaGo? We'll see in the 5th match whether he can keep that streak going.
I've gotten better at cleaning my apartment due to the Roomba and what I've learned from it. All right. What role do human factors and user experience have in advancing robotics and AI?
That's the most important thing, and I think that's underestimated by a lot of AI research and a lot of engineers. It's what is the user experience? Take the Roomba, for instance. The first Roomba, anyone here? I don't know if anyone here had the first Roomba. It had 3 buttons on it, S, M, and L. What were they there? That was for a small room, a medium room, and a large room. How does anyone know what size the room is? And there was a rocker switch for on-off. Now there's just one button in the middle. It says a green button that says clean, and that's the user experience, clean. You can go in and program it to do more complex things, but it's about making it so that people are able to use it. Our cell phones are very complex devices, but I bet not a single person here has taken a 6-month community college course on how to use a cell phone. Whereas every industrial machine, you're expected to take a course to learn how to use it. User experience is an important part of designing them to be better.
I believe, in fact, that you set the initial price of the Roomba at $199.99 because you thought that was the amount that somebody could...
We went out and we asked people in malls, how much can you pay without having to check with your spouse? and $200 was the answer, so that's how we designed it.
It's lower in my house, but I got the approval for the Roomba purchase. How will robots help U.S. manufacturing compete on the global stage?
The average age of a skilled U.S. manufacturing worker is 56. The median age of all manufacturing workers is in the mid-40s in the U.S. The manufacturing workforce is getting older because people don't want those jobs. Most companies we talk to who would like to have a second shift can't have a second shift because they can't get people who are willing to work a second shift. So what our robots are doing in many of the companies, and those in the lead-in, there was something from Steelcase, they're having the robots work a second shift when there are no humans around doing simple batch tasks, and then the people come in and do the more dexterous tasks, so they increase the productivity overall.
Okay. Which companies do you see making the most influential breakthroughs in robotics besides your own?
Besides? I think we're going to see, and we're seeing it. We're seeing lots of small VC-backed companies start with an idea and then get bought by a bigger company. So we just saw GM yesterday bought a self-driving company out of Silicon Valley. During the last week, we saw Toyota hire everyone in a self-driving company in Cambridge.
Right.
So I think the small venture-backed companies are going to have the good ideas, and then they're going to get sucked into bigger companies that can deploy at scale, because you can't deploy at scale as a small company in robotics. You can deploy software at scale. You can't deploy physical robots at scale. So small companies are the place that the...
So small companies are what you're most interested in, particularly the small companies that haven't just been purchased by Uber, GM, Toyota.
Yeah.
Besides Fast, Cheap, and Out of Control, what is your favorite robot movie?
Oh, 2001, Space Odyssey, of course. You know, Hal was just amazing. You know, Hal could do, Hal was a murdering psychopath, but we can forgive that because Hal was such an amazing machine. And to me, I was a teenager in Australia. It opened my eyes to what might be possible with AI.
And so you watched that and it inspired you, right?
It inspired me, absolutely. Yeah.
It's guided your career.
Yeah.
What's the thing you're most excited about that you're working on at Rethink right now?
I'm not going to tell you.
Yeah. What are the product secrets that you are most concerned about leaking into a room full of potential competitors at the moment?
I think the thing that I find most exciting is how, if you buy an industrial robot today, it's 9 months to 18 months deployment time, planning, getting it out there. We're trying to get it, out of the box, have it working within an hour. Most places it's not that quick. It's a few days, but getting it down to make it like the cell phone experience. You take it out of the box and you're using it you don't need lots of people to configure it. It just works.
How many people work at Rethink right now?
About 110 people.
Is there a moral code that should guide future generations of robotics researchers and product developers?
Yeah, I think there absolutely is a place for morals. My points before were about people trying to apply it in ways that don't make sense at this point. So yes, just as there's a moral code about genetic engineering, and I think we're going to be really, it's really really something that we have to worry about with the new techniques that are coming.
And well, this is a fascinating one. Will you open the robot back door to the FBI? So imagine a scenario.
Right now, we're trying to close the back door because we haven't had, there is a real issue here. And I'm not going to talk about the FBI because I haven't thought about that part of it. But you put robots in someone's company on their factory floor, And if hackers can get in and then take control of the robots,
Yeah.
that's going to be a bad thing, and that's not going to be good.
How do you defend against hackers right now?
Right now, our robots are not on the network because our early customers, it's hard for people here to believe, our early customers, small factories around the US, in general don't have network on the floor. So that we had no way, the only way we can update software right now is someone has to go to a PC that's connected to the net, download the new code to a thumb drive, and then put that thumb drive into the robot physically. That's going to change over the next 2 or 3 years as things become networked. And it's a serious question of how we protect from people hacking the robots.
So the robots will become networked, and you will need to protect them.
Yeah.
And there may be scenarios where a robot has information that law enforcement wants, but I can't.
I suspect what's going to happen for us is we're going to piggyback on other people's security systems. So it's going to be the question of whether that security system is openable and has a backdoor or not. Because we're not going to develop. We're not a security company. We're a purchaser of that technology.
One of your funders is Jeff Bezos, who presumably has lots of security baked into Amazon. And
It's his personal funds, not Amazon.
What is your opinion on writing, aggregating robots in journalism? Put another way, will Nick have a job in a couple of years?
Yeah, he's a pain in the butt enough that he will. The aggregating, I don't enjoy the aggregated stories. I mean, I see them in business journals all the time, and it turns me off. So,
but there are robots that, for example, can write, they can write summaries of sports events, right? They can say, the Red Sox beat the Phillies and this happened.
Yeah,
right?
I don't call them robots, by the way. I call them AI systems, but that semantics aside. We'll probably see more of it. Probably see more of it.
Can you comment on the idea of downloading your brain or DNA into robots?
Or into the cloud. Yeah, this has been a common, it's been going on for at least 60 years now. AI researchers have been making predictions about when that will happen. Typically, it's been around when they turn 70 that's going to be possible. In Ray Kurzweil's case, it's a little longer because he's got this whole thing with taking 200 pills a day to live longer. He predicts it's going to be in 2029. He believes he'll still be alive then. This to me is a form of techno-religion, where it's a way of getting eternal life without the inconvenience of having to believe in God. I think it's going to be a lot longer. Every time I see Ray Kurzweil, I say, Ray, you're going to die. He hates it. But I'm pretty sure I'm going to die. I'm pretty sure you're going to die. There may be some people in the world, very young, who have a better chance, but I don't think we're there yet by a long shot.
And we're not there because of all the reasons you talked about on this panel. Christina Amini, who I went to college with. How do you think the best advancements in robotics are made? Singular geniuses, teamwork, or something else?
Oh, as with all science, it's a combination. There are some people who come up with something new in the science level, but to make progress, you need a team, and you really need lots and lots of teams. So all these self-driving cars use something which is called SLAM, simultaneous localization and mapping. I first wrote a paper about that in 1983. I had a sucky statistical model, worse than sucky. It was really bad. Once we got low-cost mobile robot platforms that lots of research labs around the world could afford, by the 90s there were thousands of people working on that problem, and those thousands of people together made the progress. Some were working in teams on a particular project, some individual geniuses coming up with new parts of the equation, but it was a product of thousands and thousands of people thinking that these were a set of problems to solve.
Have you had a eureka moment in your career where suddenly something became very clear that had not been clear the day before?
I did. It's a little hard to explain. It was. The AI that I was brought up in was about having a central representation where everything had to go into the central representation, and I'd been sitting without speaking to people for family reasons in a place where none of my relatives spoke English that I'd married into, and I was sitting for a month thinking about AI at the start of my faculty research career, and I was watching insects and drawing diagrams about how to control robot insects, and I realized we didn't have to have a consistent single world model. there can be multiple partial models which are inconsistent and still have coherent behavior.
And it suddenly came to you.
Yeah.
Follow-up, how did your marriage last if for a month you were sitting about insects, not talking to any of your in-laws?
Well,
How soon will I have a robot in my house, Anna Torres?
we can buy one now. You can have a Roomba in your house. If you want to know about a robot that's going to help you with elder care, I think that's going to be 15 to 20 years away.
What's the best methodology or tools to teach robotics to the next generation?
I think it's about having build and do sorts of classwork where everyone's trying to build things, they're trying to debug them, they're playing with the mechanical system, they're playing with the electrical system, they're playing with the software system. And maybe it's competitions between them, or maybe it's just who can build I like building the coolest robot. I think that's more fun. But yeah, having hands-on, let's try to build something.
Did you actively teach your children? I mean, one of your daughters builds technology tools for female engineers. Did you actually teach them about robots, take robots apart, put them together?
We didn't do robots, but in the case of Alice, who has that company or sold it recently, she likes to point out that when she asked me for a Barbie, I gave her a saw and told her to make her own toys, which she did, and she's eternally grateful.
Come for the insights into AI, get family parenting tips too. Do you think deep learning and reinforcement learning are the future of cognitive robotics?
You could have asked this question 20 years ago and everyone would have said no, except for the people working in reinforcement learning. It's a current hot area. I expect there'll be more progress made, but I also expect that 5 years from now there'll be some different technique which will be the current hot thing. That's always been the way. And out of that, things slowly build up.
Do you see any future on research on artificial life? Who is doing it today?
There's not as many people working on artificial life as used to be. There's the computational artificial life. There's people actually trying to build cells de novo, which is another interesting biotech area. If I was able to spend all my time thinking about an intellectual pursuit, I would probably work on artificial life myself. I think there's still a lot to be learnt there, a few lifetimes worth.
What company would you be most interested in buying today? Besides Google, which would get you all of the...
I'd buy Google if I could afford it. What company would I be most interested in buying today? In terms of, with my current company, it would be a company, a small company that had some really breakthrough perceptual capabilities.
You mean vision and hearing and...
Well, useful for my robots, vision, most likely.
Mm-hmm. There have not been huge breakthroughs in vision in recent years? Or
there have.
More?
But
what kind of vision do your robots not have?
This surprises people. You go into a factory and there's something called a bin of parts. There's just a big bin. People poured the parts in there. The perception to be able to see which one's on the top and which one you can grasp and go and grab it. Simple to state.
Yeah.
Been 40 years of research, hasn't been done well.
So your robots have the visual capabilities of a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old?
Not even a 2-year-old. If the object is separated from on a clean background, then it can pull that out. But if there's any clutter around it, it doesn't do well. I
had a 1-year-old in a Roomba, and I thought they're extremely similar because they basically go around the house just picking up any small object and eating it. Yeah, but have you seen the really disturbing videos, not of the cats on the Roomba, but where people put little seats for their kids on the Roombas and the Roombas drive around with the babies in them? Well, that particular... The 7-year-old and the 5-year-old like to feed the Roomba, and the 2-year-old likes to surf the Roomba. That's how the Roomba, and occasionally the Roomba cleans the apartment. All right, that's it. Rodney Brooks is great answering questions. You are great asking questions. This was a wonderful panel. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, South by Southwest. And
thank you.
It's so much fun to ask you questions, Rodney. He's one of the most fun people in the world to interview. So I had a great time, and I hope you all enjoyed it too.
Yep.